Welcome back. In the course of ethnicity, it's time for us to jump in the deep end with just getting our head around some important concepts. And when we are getting our head around important concepts, one of the tried and tested ways of doing that is for us to read an introduction to an area of anthropological theory and an introductory text, and to do that not once but maybe twice as a way of just helping us make sure that we have understood the most important people in the evolution of these ideas. And what I'm going to do is, this is going to be one of a number of lectures where I recommend introductory chapters which introduce the important themes of ethnicity and of why ethnicity and race is different. And what we're going to be doing is, it's going to be kind of like putting the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together. All of you have got ideas about what race is and isn't. And some of you, but perhaps not all of you, have an idea of what we mean by ethnicity. And some of you may think that they are the same thing. Some of you may not. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this phenomenon from a range of angles. And this is going to be in a series where we're going to be kind of putting some readings together with some recommended watching on YouTube. And before every YouTube, I'm going to do a short introduction before you watch it, and then a short summary of what I understood to be the most important points. This chapter on ethnicity is part of a book written by, co-authored by Raymond Skupin and his colleague. And actually Raymond Skupin did field work in Thailand for many years, and he wrote many things about Muslim communities in Bangkok. A very fine scholar, an American man. And he provides one of a number of introductions to the concept of ethnicity. And like many people who introduce this concept, he compares the idea of ethnicity with race, which is different from ethnicity. Mostly the idea of race is used to describe physical characteristics, skin colour, skin pigmentation, hair, and all sorts of other things. He provides a summary on page 549, summarising many of his case studies are American case studies, being an American scholar, and interestingly, like Thailand, actually, in terms of ethnicity, America is a very ethnically diverse place, similar to Thailand, which we've established as an incredibly linguistically and ethnically diverse geobody. He mentions in page 549, he mentions the one drop rule, that it was common at one stage in America that if you had one drop of African American blood, you were considered to be African American. And he provides an anecdote about the way that blood transfusions in some Southern American states were considered to be were illegal. He also provides some interesting anecdotes that in order for Native Americans to be considered to be Native Americans, they needed to have a certain percentage of their blood to be Native American blood. But the idea of race is very different from ethnicity. And we're going to be looking at these important distinctions through interacting with a range of videos and articles and book chapters. A very, very important concept for us to get right. So, Scoopin from page 550 writes, eventually in various European languages, the terms... Why don't we go to full screen now? I think we can go to full screen. Eventually in various European languages, the terms ethnically, ethnicity, responded to an association with race. Race, language, and religion were perceived as a fusion of physical and cultural traits by the Western scholars and anthropologists of the 19th century, of the late 1800s. One acquires his or her language and the culture through enculturation by learning the language and various symbols, norms, and beliefs in the environment to which one is exposed. Since the 1960s, anthropologists and other social scientists have generally used the term ethnicity or ethnic group to refer to an individual's cultural heritage, which is separate from one's physical characteristics. We emphasize both the objective and subjective aspects of ethnicity. The objective aspect of ethnicity is the observable culture and shared symbols of a particular group. It may involve a specific language, religious tradition that is maintained by the group, or it may involve a particular clothing, hairstyle, preference in food, and other conspicuous characteristics. Further on, we're still on page 155, the subjective aspect of ethnicity involves the internal beliefs of the people regarding their shared ancestry. They may believe that their ethnic group has a shared origin, family, ancestry, or common homeland. In some cases, they may believe that people of their ethnicity have specific physical characteristics in common. This subjective aspect of ethnicity entails a we feeling, a sense of community or oneness that within one's own in-group versus other out-groups. Thus, one's ethnicity is not innately determined by biology or purported racial characteristics, despite early classifications of the European race or the English or German, French, Polish races. These differences amongst Europeans are based not on physical, but on linguistic and cultural variations. Likewise, there is no African race, rather Africa is an entire continent where hundreds of distinct ethnic groups reside that vary from region to region. Because ethnicity is based upon cultural characteristics, it is much more variable, modifiable, and interchangeable, and we may see more situational than an identity based on physical characteristics. One early model of ethnicity was developed in the 1960s, and this was a model developed by Clifford Geertz, an American scholar. In the 1960s, Geertz attempted to describe how many third world countries were tried to build nations and integrate their political institutions based on a civil order, political system based on democracy representation processes rather than traditional ties of kinship or religion. However, this new civil order clashed with older traditions or primordial aspects of kinship, race, ethnicity, language, and others. And he's quoting Geertz from 1963. In this view, as people are enculturated into a particular ethnic group, they form deep emotional attachments to it. These emotional sentiments are sometimes evident through ethnic boundary markers such as religion, dress, language or dialect or other visible symbols which distinguish one ethnic group from another. Geertz tended to focus on the intense internal aspects of this ethnicity and the deep subjective feelings of belonging to a particular ethnic group. This is one of the strengths of the primordialist perspective on ethnicity. It emphasizes the meaning and significance that people invest in their ethnic attachments. Geertz emphasized how the assumed givens are subjective perceptions of attributes such as blood ties and ancestry, which may or not coincide with the actual circumstances of one's birth. But in a number of case studies in a book written by Karl Barth, and I'll have some videos, you can see the guy and you can hear some interviews about his research career. Barth noted the fluidity of ethnic relations in different types of multi-ethnic societies. Although ethnic groups maintain boundaries such as language to mark their identity, people can modify or shift their language and ethnic identity in different types of social interactions. He criticised the view of culture based on either anthropological research in small-scale societies that tended to treat ethnic groups as having discrete, impermeable boundaries. But Barth emphasised the interaction between ethnic groups and how people identify with different elements of their own ethnicity while expressing or repressing other elements and characteristics in different circumstances for economic, political, or other practical reasons. This approach is referred to as the instrumentalist approach to ethnicity, but it has become better widely known in anthropology as circumstantialist models or conceptions of ethnicity. So in this circumstantialist approach, Barth emphasised how ethnic boundary markers such as language, clothing and other cultural traits are not based on deeply rooted, enduring aspects of ethnicity. Rather, the boundaries are constantly being revised and negotiated and redefined according to the practical interests of the people. Ethnic boundaries are generated by the varying contexts and circumstances that influence a particular individual. So, in addition to that, and we're reading on, we are up to page 551 of Skupin's Introduction to Ethnicity. Barth demonstrated how some people modify and change their ethnic identity as it is perceived to be advantageous to their own interests. They may emphasise the racial identities or of others to establish boundaries between themselves and others in order to define themselves differently and interact with others for political or economic purposes. Thus, in Barth's view, ethnicity is not fixed and unchanged, but is fluid, contingent on people's strategically use, define and redefine the ethnicity depending on their immediate needs. So I think Skupin really offers us, a very, very tight, over 2 pages, a very nice tight summary of 2 of the most important, 3 things. First of all, the differences between race and ethnicity, and a primordial idea of ethnicity, most attributed to Clifford Geertz, compared with circumstantialist or situationalist perceptions of ethnic boundaries, which will change depending on the situation or the circumstance. And one of the scholars that this idea is associated with is a guy called Frederick Barth. And so what we're going to do after this is we are going to briefly introduce you to a few videos that you can begin to jump in and watch, but not as a substitution for reading. It's helpful when we're getting to grips with a new area that we may watch some videos to get our head around it. It may help us get key concepts right, but this is only something that really gets us into reading. But you can't cite a YouTube video in your essay or your thesis. But it is a quick way, an easy way, perhaps at the end of the day, perhaps you're on the bus on the way home, in the train, put a YouTube video on and watch something. Nothing wrong with that, but remember, you don't pass exams and you don't complete a thesis because you've watched these videos. So stay tuned. You will be able to find these series of intros to these YouTube videos that introduce this idea of ethnicity. Thanks for watching.